Cathar adjusted the heavy armor on his broad shoulders as he stepped off the Zarkiri transport vessel. The sleek silver ship hovered above Earth's surface, its hum fading into the crisp air. He surveyed the landscape with mild disdain. The humans had a green and blue world, lush and vibrant, but he doubted their military sophistication matched the grandeur of their planet. Standing at the edge of the landing site, a group of uniformed humans waited. Their leader, a tall man with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor, stepped forward and extended his hand. "Welcome to Earth. I'm Colonel James Taylor," he said, his voice steady and warm. Cathar tilted his head, observing the gesture with curiosity before clasping the human's hand. It felt odd, this act of physical contact as a greeting. On Zarkir, respect was shown through a formal bow, but humans seemed to favor something more direct. "I am Cathar, commander of the 7th Dominion Fleet," he replied, his deep voice resonating with authority. Colonel Taylor gave a faint smile. "We've prepared a demonstration of our military capabilities. I understand your Dominion is interested in evaluating our forces." Cathar nodded. "The Dominion values strength above all else. We must determine if Earth is worthy of our consideration as an ally or a potential threat." His tone carried the faintest hint of condescension, one he didn't bother to hide. The humans led him to a convoy of vehicles waiting nearby. Cathar climbed into one of their armored transports, his massive frame almost too large for the seat. As the vehicle rumbled forward, he took note of the human's technology. It was primitive by Zarkiri standards, relying on combustion engines and projectile-based weaponry. "This world is years behind ours," Cathar thought, suppressing a smirk. "What could these people possibly teach us?" The convoy arrived at a sprawling military base. Soldiers moved with precision, but Cathar noticed the lack of advanced battle suits or robotic enforcers. Instead, the humans relied on teamwork and discipline. Colonel Taylor guided Cathar toward a central training ground, where rows of troops stood at attention. "We've prepared a live simulation," the colonel said. "You'll see how we handle various scenarios." Cathar raised a skeptical brow ridge but said nothing. He stood on a platform overlooking the field as the exercise began. To his surprise, the human soldiers moved with remarkable coordination. They adapted swiftly to shifting challenges, forming new strategies on the fly. Cathar noticed something unusual. They didn't rely solely on orders from above. Instead, individual soldiers displayed initiative, working together to outmaneuver simulated threats. "They fight like a single organism," Cathar muttered under his breath, his previous confidence starting to waver. One moment stood out. A group of soldiers had to eliminate a target using limited resources. They used the terrain to their advantage, setting traps and feints. Within minutes, they succeeded. Cathar couldn't help but feel a flicker of respect. "Impressive, isn't it?" Colonel Taylor said, stepping beside him. Cathar's expression remained neutral, though his mind raced. "It is unorthodox," he admitted. "You do not rely on overwhelming force or superior technology. You rely on improvisation." Taylor chuckled. "Humans have had to adapt to survive. Sometimes, it's not about what you have but how you use it." Cathar didn't respond immediately. For the first time, he wondered if he had underestimated these beings. His mission to evaluate humanity was beginning to take an unexpected turn. As the simulation ended, the soldiers saluted sharply, their faces glistening with sweat, but filled with pride. Cathar watched them march off the field, his mind weighed with questions. Perhaps Earth had more to offer than he had assumed. Cathar's curiosity was growing, though he didn't want to admit it. The humans had shown unexpected discipline during the simulation, but he still doubted their effectiveness in a real battle. To him, it felt more like clever tricks than true military might. Colonel Taylor led him to a large, high-tech briefing room. The walls were lined with holographic displays showing maps, strategies, and battle plans. A group of human officers stood around a circular table, their expressions serious but focused. "We'd like you to join us for a strategy session," Taylor said, gesturing to an empty seat. Cathar frowned. "Your strategies will hardly surprise me," he said, his tone sharp. "The Dominion has mastered warfare for centuries." Taylor didn't seem offended. Instead, he simply nodded. "We'll see." As Cathar sat, a young human officer named Lieutenant Morgan began speaking. She looked far too young to be commanding anything, Cathar thought, but her voice carried authority. "Our exercise today was a simulation of a planetary defense scenario. The goal was to defend key locations while preventing enemy forces from flanking our position," Morgan began, gesturing to a holographic map. Cathar leaned back, arms crossed, watching closely. He expected her to rely on overwhelming force, the way most species did. Instead, she outlined a plan that used decoys and misdirection to confuse the enemy, forcing them into vulnerable positions. By the time the enemy realizes their mistake, Morgan concluded, it's already too late. Their forces are divided, and we strike with precision. Cathar's brow furrowed. The strategy was risky, relying on quick thinking and adaptability, but it was also brilliant. He leaned forward, studying the hologram. "What if your decoys fail?" he asked. Morgan didn't hesitate. "We've accounted for that. Each decoy has secondary and tertiary objectives. Even if the enemy catches on, we'll still gain strategic advantages, like delaying their main force." Her confidence caught him off guard. Humans were far more tactical than he had imagined. Another officer chimed in, discussing potential weaknesses in the enemy's fleet design. Cathar recognized their sharp attention to detail, something even the Dominion strategists sometimes overlooked. "Interesting," Cathar muttered, almost to himself. Colonel Taylor noticed his reaction. "We value creativity in our approach. Rigid plans rarely survive first contact with the enemy. Adaptation is our strength." Cathar glanced at him, his skepticism softening. Adaptation. That is not a common strength in many species. The meeting continued, and Cathar found himself more engaged than he expected. The humans debated strategies openly, challenging each other's ideas and refining their plans. This was unlike the Dominion, where orders were absolute and questioning them was seen as a weakness. When the session ended, Cathar stood and addressed the room. "Your strategies are unconventional, but I see their value. You think not like soldiers, but like hunters." Morgan smiled faintly. "We've had to hunt for survival for most of our history. It's in our nature." Cathar didn't reply but felt a growing respect for the humans. They didn't have the Dominion's advanced technology or their centuries of experience, but their ingenuity and adaptability were undeniable. As he left the room with Colonel Taylor, he asked, "Why do you allow such open debate among your officers? Does it not breed dissent?" Taylor shook his head. "It strengthens us. Every perspective adds value. Even the best plan can be improved with fresh ideas." Cathar pondered this as they walked. It was a concept foreign to the Dominion, where following orders without question was the norm. Perhaps this was why humanity had survived in such a harsh galaxy. As the day ended, Cathar couldn't shake the feeling that the humans were more than they appeared. Their strength wasn't in their weapons, but in their minds. And for the first time, he wondered if the Dominion had something to learn from Earth. The next day, Cathar stood on a rugged training ground, the morning sun casting long shadows over the field. Rows of human soldiers in simple gear were preparing for a live combat exercise. Unlike the advanced mech suits and energy shields of the Zarkiri Dominion, these humans carried lightweight rifles and packs filled with supplies. Cathar couldn't help but think how vulnerable they seemed. Colonel Taylor appeared beside him, his usual calm demeanor intact. "Today's exercise will be different. You'll be joining one of the squads to see our methods up close." Cathar frowned. "You want me to fight alongside your troops?" Taylor nodded. "Think of it as an immersive observation. You might learn more by being in the field than watching from a distance." Cathar reluctantly agreed, though the idea of following humans into battle felt beneath him. He joined a squad of 6 soldiers who greeted him with friendly nods, though he noticed their curious glances at his imposing armor and weaponry. "You'll stick with us," a soldier named Jackson said, his voice light but confident. "Just try to keep up." Cathar almost laughed. "I could outrun and outfight all of you without breaking a sweat." He thought but said nothing. The exercise began with a loud horn. Their objective was to infiltrate an enemy base, simulated by another group of soldiers, retrieve a data core, and escape undetected. Cathar expected the humans to charge in recklessly, but instead they moved with surprising stealth and precision. The squad communicated through hand signals and whispers, navigating the dense forest with ease. Cathar noticed how they used the terrain to their advantage, sticking to the shadows and avoiding open spaces. Despite his initial doubts, he felt a twinge of admiration. After an hour of careful maneuvering, they reached the outskirts of the enemy base. It was a mock setup with watchtowers and patrolling guards. Jackson signaled the team to halt, then turned to Cathar. "We need a distraction to draw their attention." "Your armor might be perfect for that," Jackson whispered. Cathar raised an eyebrow. "You want me to be bait?" Jackson grinned. "Think of it as playing to your strengths." Cathar scowled but complied. He stepped into the open, his armored frame gleaming in the sunlight. Immediately, the guard spotted him and raised the alarm. Cathar activated his energy shield, easily deflecting the mock bullets as he charged forward. Behind him, the squad slipped through a side entrance unnoticed. Cathar continued to draw fire, using his strength to dismantle obstacles and create chaos. Though he initially resented the role, he found himself enjoying the thrill of the challenge. Meanwhile, the squad reached the data core, a glowing box secured in a locked room. Using tools and teamwork, they bypassed the security and secured their prize. Jackson signaled for extraction, and the team slipped out the way they came, meeting Cathar at a predetermined point. "You did great out there," Jackson said, clapping Cathar on the back. Cathar huffed. "You humans are reckless, relying on improvisation and luck." "Luck had nothing to do with it," Jackson replied. "It's about trust. Each of us has a role, and we rely on one another to get the job done." Cathar fell silent, thinking about the camaraderie he had witnessed. The Dominion valued strength and individual prowess, but these humans valued teamwork above all. As they returned to the base, Cathar couldn't shake the feeling that he had underestimated humanity yet again. Their ability to adapt, their resourcefulness, and their unity were unlike anything he had seen before. Perhaps, he thought, there was more to strength than sheer power. Cathar sat in the mess hall that evening, surrounded by the hum of conversation and the clatter of plates. The soldiers who had been part of the day's exercise sat nearby, sharing stories and laughing. Despite his initial resistance, Cathar felt oddly at ease in their presence. "You've been quiet," Jackson said, sliding onto the bench across from him with a plate of food. "Not what I expected from a Zarkiri commander." Cathar's piercing eyes met Jackson's. "I am observing," he replied. "Your methods are unconventional, your resources limited, yet your soldiers fight with a determination I find unusual." Jackson chuckled. "You mean stubbornness?" "Perhaps," Cathar admitted, "but it is more than that. There is something unyielding in your people." Jackson leaned back, folding his arms. "We've had to be. Earth's history is full of struggles, wars, natural disasters, survival against impossible odds. That's just who we are." Another soldier, a woman named Taurus, joined the conversation. "You've been in wars, right? Your Dominion has all that fancy tech. How does it feel to rely on machines instead of people?" Cathar hesitated. He had never questioned the Dominion's reliance on technology and brute force. To him, it was logical, efficient. But sitting among these humans, he felt an unfamiliar weight in their words. "In the Dominion," Cathar began, "we fight for the glory of our empire, for the strength of our species. Individual bonds are secondary. We are expected to succeed on our own merits. Torres raised an eyebrow. Sounds lonely. Cathar's jaw tightened. Loneliness is irrelevant in war. Strength is all that matters. Jackson exchanged a glance with Torres before speaking. Strength isn't just about muscles or tech. It's about knowing someone has your back, no matter what. That's what makes us stronger. Cathar looked around the room. The humans laughed, teased, and encouraged each other. They shared burdens and victories alike. It was a camaraderie he had rarely experienced in the Dominion. The conversation shifted as Torres began recounting a personal story. A few years ago, my unit got trapped during a mission. We were outnumbered and outgunned, but our captain refused to give up. He rallied us, made us believe we could win, and we did. She smiled, though her eyes glimmered with the weight of memory. It wasn't our weapons or training that saved us. It was his faith in us, and ours in him. Cathar listened intently. The idea of drawing strength from others was foreign to him, yet he couldn't deny the impact it seemed to have on these humans. Before he could respond, the mess hall lights dimmed slightly, signaling the end of the evening meal. As the soldiers dispersed, Jackson clapped Cathar on the shoulder. "Get some rest, Commander. Tomorrow's going to be another long day." Cathar nodded, though his mind was far from settled. He returned to his quarters, a simple room that lacked the grandeur of Zarkiri accommodations. As he sat on the edge of the bed, he replayed the day's events in his mind. The humans had shown him a side of war he had never considered. They fought not out of duty alone, but for each other. Their strength was not just in their tactics, but in their bonds. Cathar found himself questioning the Dominion's ways. Was strength truly measured by power alone, or was there something more? For the first time in years, he felt unsure of his beliefs, and yet that uncertainty sparked a flicker of something else, a desire to understand these humans better. Tomorrow, he thought, he would learn more. For now, he would rest, letting the hum of human laughter linger in his thoughts. The next morning, Cathar stood outside the command center, watching as soldiers prepared for another day of training. The air was brisk, and the sun cast a warm glow over the base. For the first time, he felt a sense of anticipation. He wanted to see more of what these humans were capable of. But the calm didn't last. A sudden alarm blared across the base, cutting through the morning stillness. Soldiers rushed to their stations, their movements precise but urgent. Colonel Taylor appeared moments later, his face grim. "What's happening?" Cathar demanded, his hand instinctively moving to his weapon. Taylor motioned for Cathar to follow him into the command center. "A rogue Zarkiri faction is approaching Earth. They've ignored all diplomatic channels and are demanding the planet's immediate surrender." Cathar's eyes widened. A Zarkiri faction? Impossible. No one would dare defy the Dominion's treaties. Taylor shook his head. "Apparently, someone is willing to risk it. Our intelligence shows they brought a small but heavily armed fleet. We're outmatched in firepower." Cathar's chest tightened. His people had the most advanced weaponry in the galaxy, far superior to anything Earth could muster. A direct confrontation would be devastating for the humans. "Your forces will be annihilated," Cathar said bluntly. Taylor turned to him, his calm demeanor unwavering. "Maybe. But surrender isn't an option. We're not going down without a fight." Cathar stared at him, stunned by his resolve. The human soldiers didn't have the advantage, yet they were preparing as if victory were still within reach. "What's the plan?" Cathar asked after a moment. Taylor gestured to a holographic display showing the incoming fleet. "We can't face them head-on. We'll use our knowledge of Earth's terrain and our ability to adapt. Guerrilla tactics, precision strikes, and coordinated ambushes. It's risky, but it's our best shot." Cathar frowned. The plan sounded reckless, yet it was undeniably human, relying on cunning and unpredictability over brute force. "Let me help," Cathar said, surprising even himself. "I know how Zarkiri ships operate. I can give you an advantage." Taylor studied him for a moment before nodding. We'll take all the help we can get." Within hours, the base transformed into a hive of activity. Soldiers armed themselves, drones were deployed for reconnaissance, and squads were assigned their roles. Cathar worked alongside the humans, offering insights into Zarkiri tactics and weaknesses. As the enemy fleet entered Earth's orbit, the tension in the command center was palpable. Cathar stood with Taylor, watching the displays as the first wave of Zarkiri ships descended. "They'll deploy ground forces first to secure key locations," Cathar said. "They'll expect resistance, but not this level of coordination. Use that to your advantage." Taylor nodded, issuing commands to his officers. Moments later, the first skirmish began. Cathar watched in awe as the humans executed their plan with precision. They struck from the shadows, using the terrain to outmaneuver the Zarkiri troops. Traps and ambushes delayed the enemy's advance, forcing them into vulnerable positions. But the Zarkiri forces weren't easily defeated. Their advanced weaponry began to take its toll, and human casualties mounted. Cathar felt a pang of guilt as he watched. These soldiers were fighting with everything they had, yet the odds were still stacked against them. "We need to hit their command ship," Cathar said suddenly. "If we disable their leadership, the rest will fall into disarray." Taylor glanced at him. "Do you know how to get us in?" Cathar nodded. "It won't be easy, but it's possible." Taylor didn't hesitate. "Then let's do it." As the battle raged on, Cathar found himself fighting alongside the humans. For the first time in his life, he wasn't fighting for the Dominion or for glory. He was fighting for something greater, the resilience and spirit of these humans who refused to back down. And as he charged into the fray, he realized something profound. Strength wasn't about power or technology. It was about heart, and these humans had it in abundance. Cathar crouched behind a wall of rubble, his armor scratched and scorched from the ongoing battle. The air was thick with smoke, and the distant rumble of explosions shook the ground beneath him. He glanced over at Jackson and Torres, who were huddled nearby, their faces smeared with dirt, but their eyes sharp with determination. "We're pinned down here," Torres muttered, her voice tight with frustration. "They're pushing us hard." Cathar adjusted his weapon and scanned the battlefield. Zarkiri troops advanced steadily, their precision and firepower overwhelming. For every human squad that managed to slow them down, another was forced to retreat. Yet, the humans didn't break. "They're relentless," Cathar said, both impressed and concerned. "Your people don't know when to give up." Jackson grinned despite the situation. "That's the idea. We're stubborn like that." A burst of enemy fire forced them to duck, the wall behind them crumbling further. Cathar's mind raced. The human forces were buying time, but it wouldn't last. They needed a decisive move. "Colonel Taylor," Cathar said into his comms, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We must strike the command ship now. The ground forces won't falter as long as their leadership remains intact." Taylor's voice crackled through the comms. "We're prepping for the assault, but we need more time. Can you hold them off a little longer?" Cathar clenched his jaw. Time. It was always time, but he understood its value now more than ever. Turning to the soldiers, he said, "We need to distract them, draw their attention away from the command team." Torres nodded. "What's the plan?" Cathar's lips curved into a rare, faint smile. "We make them think we're stronger than we are." Before anyone could question him, Cathar stood and unleashed a barrage of suppressing fire, advancing with calculated aggression. The Zarkiri troops shifted their focus, falling into defensive positions. Jackson and Torres exchanged a quick glance before following Cathar's lead. They fired in unison, creating the illusion of a larger force. Using smoke grenades and improvised explosions, they created chaos among the enemy ranks. Cathar's heart pounded as he moved through the battlefield. His armor was designed for direct combat, but the humans fought with sheer creativity. They used the environment to their advantage, setting traps and using misdirection to confuse the enemy. Despite the odds, the human soldiers fought with an unshakable resolve. A medic rushed past Cathar, dragging the wounded soldier to safety while still firing his sidearm. Another soldier, out of ammunition, used a makeshift club to hold off an advancing enemy. Cathar felt something stir within him, something he hadn't felt in years. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight for something far greater, each other. "Taylor," Cathar called again. "We're holding them for now, but you need to move." "Understood," Taylor replied. "We're in position. Prepare for extraction." Cathar relayed the message to his squad. "We're pulling back. The strike team is moving in." Jackson grinned, wiping sweat from his brow. About time. The squad retreated methodically, covering each other as they moved. Cathar brought up the rear, his weapon blazing as he provided cover fire. When they reached the extraction point, Cathar turned to see the results of their efforts. The Zarkiri forces were in disarray, their movements disorganized as they struggled to regroup. The human strike team launched their attack moments later, targeting the command ship with surgical precision. Explosions lit up the sky as the ship's defenses crumbled. Cathar watched in awe as the humans achieved the impossible once again. They had turned the tide not with superior weapons, but with sheer determination and ingenuity. For the first time, he felt pride not for himself or his people, but for the humans he had fought beside. These beings, so underestimated by the galaxy, had proven that true strength came from within. As the Zarkiri forces began to retreat, Cathar knew the battle was far from over. But he also knew one thing for certain: the humans would never stop fighting. And neither would he. The battlefield was quieter now, but tension hung heavy in the air. Smoke rose in plumes from the destroyed vehicles and weapons scattered across the ground. Cathar stood with Jackson, Torres, and the remaining soldiers of their squad near the extraction point. They had fought relentlessly, and their battered faces showed both exhaustion and determination. Overhead, the human strike team's assault on the Zarkiri command ship was still underway. The explosions from the sky cast an eerie light over the battlefield. Every boom seemed to echo with a mix of hope and uncertainty. "They're holding up there," Torres said, watching the flickers of light in the clouds. "But it's not over yet." Cathar adjusted his damaged armor, the weight of the day's battles heavy on him. "Your forces have done the impossible so far, but the Zarkiri won't retreat easily. Their pride will force them to retaliate." Jackson smirked. "Good thing humans don't give up easily either." Before Cathar could respond, Colonel Taylor's voice came through their comms. "Ground teams, this is Taylor. The strike team has disabled the command ship's shields and main engines, but the Zarkiri captain refuses to surrender. We're sending reinforcements to finish the job." Cathar stepped forward, his voice firm. "Taylor, let me lead the final assault. I know how to breach their defenses and force their captain's hand." There was a pause on the line before Taylor replied. "You're certain about this?" Cathar's gaze swept over the human soldiers standing around him. They had fought valiantly, and their resilience had inspired something deep within him. "I've fought under their tactics long enough. I know their weaknesses now. Trust me." "Very well," Taylor said. "You have command of this mission. Make it count." Cathar turned to the squad. "We'll use the Zarkiri's own pride against them. They'll expect a frontal assault, but we'll take an unconventional approach, just as you humans do." Jackson grinned. "I like the sound of that." Cathar outlined his plan quickly, using the limited resources they had. The squad would create a diversion on the ship's lower decks, while Cathar and a small team infiltrated the bridge. The goal was simple: disable the ship's command systems and capture the captain. They moved swiftly, boarding the command ship through a breach left by the strike team's earlier attack. The interior was a mess of flickering lights and damaged corridors, but Zarkiri soldiers still guarded key points. "Stay close," Cathar said, leading the team through the narrow passageways. He relied on his knowledge of the ship's layout to avoid heavy resistance, but when they encountered guards, the humans fought with precision and determination. Jackson and Torres covered Cathar as he bypassed a locked bulkhead, using his Dominion override codes. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing the bridge. Inside, the Zarkiri captain stood at a control panel, his back to them. "Cathar," the captain said, his voice cold and sharp. "I see you've chosen to side with these primitives." Cathar stepped forward, his weapon raised. "They've proven themselves more than you ever could. Surrender now, or face the consequences." The captain turned, his eyes blazing with anger. "You betray your own kind for these humans. You disgrace the Dominion." "They have taught me what true strength means," Cathar replied, his voice steady. "And it is not the kind you wield with fear and arrogance." The captain roared in defiance, lunging at Cathar. The two clashed in a fierce fight, their blows shaking the bridge. Cathar's strength and training matched the captain's, but it was the thought of the humans fighting below that gave him the edge. With a final strike, Cathar disarmed the captain and held him at gunpoint. "It's over. Order your troops to retreat." The captain hesitated, his pride warring with reality. Finally, he lowered his head and gave the command. Cathar exhaled deeply as the tension drained from the room. Around him, the human soldiers cheered. "Nice work, Commander," Jackson said, clapping him on the back. Cathar allowed himself a small smile. For the first time, he felt he had truly earned the title. Together, they had turned the tide of the battle, proving that strength wasn't about technology or brute force. It was about heart, courage, and unity. The battle was over, but the air on the command ship's bridge still buzzed with tension. The Zarkiri captain sat restrained in a corner, his head bowed, his pride shattered. Around him, Cathar and the human soldiers worked quickly to secure the ship and assess the damage. Cathar stood by the main console, his fingers flying over the controls as he scanned the ship's systems. The Zarkiri fleet, now leaderless, was retreating from Earth's orbit. For the first time in hours, a fragile calm settled over the battlefield. Jackson leaned against the wall, his rifle slung over his shoulder. "Well, I'd call that a win," he said, grinning. Torres wiped sweat from her brow. "A hard-fought one. But yeah, we pulled it off." Cathar turned to them, his expression unreadable. "You pulled it off. Without your tactics and resolve, this ship would still be raining fire on your planet." Jackson laughed. "Don't sell yourself short, big guy. You were the one who took down the captain." Cathar's gaze shifted to the restrained Zarkiri leader. "It was more than that. You humans fought with a strength I didn't think possible. Not just physical strength, but something deeper." Torres smirked. "You mean our stubbornness." Cathar shook his head. "Your unity. Your willingness to risk everything for each other. In the Dominion, soldiers fight for glory and power. Here, you fight for survival and for those beside you. It's humbling." The bridge fell silent as the weight of his words settled over the group. Cathar had spent his entire life believing in the Dominion's supremacy, in the idea that strength was measured by technology and conquest. But these humans had shown him a new kind of strength, one rooted in courage, ingenuity, and an unbreakable bond. Colonel Taylor's voice crackled over the comms. "Cathar, status report." Cathar activated his comm unit. "The ship is secure. The fleet is retreating. Earth is safe, for now." "Good work," Taylor said. "We'll prepare for your return. Debriefing starts in an hour." Cathar nodded, then turned back to the humans. "Your people will celebrate tonight, as they should. You've earned this victory." Jackson raised an eyebrow. "And what about you? Aren't you part of this now?" Cathar hesitated. The idea of belonging to something other than the Dominion felt foreign, yet the thought of leaving these humans behind felt wrong. "I don't know," he admitted. "This is new to me. But I can say this. I've learned more in these days with your kind than I ever did in years of service to the Dominion." Torres grinned. "We have that effect on people." As they prepared to leave the ship, Cathar took a final look at the bridge. The Zarkiri captain, though defeated, glared at him with unspoken rage. "You've turned your back on the Dominion," the captain spat. "You'll regret this." Cathar stepped closer, his towering figure casting a shadow over the restrained captain. "No," he said firmly. "I found something greater. And that terrifies you." With that, he turned and followed the humans to the transport waiting to take them back to Earth. As the ship descended through Earth's atmosphere, Cathar gazed out at the planet below. It was beautiful, vibrant, and alive, a stark contrast to the cold efficiency of the Dominion. He had come here expecting to find weakness, but instead he had found strength in its truest form. For the first time, Cathar felt a sense of belonging. These humans had welcomed him, fought beside him, and shown him a new way to understand the galaxy. As the transport landed and the doors opened to cheering soldiers, Cathar stepped out, his chest swelling with pride, not for the Dominion, but for the people who had changed him. And for the first time in his life, he smiled. The transport doors opened to the sound of cheering. Human soldiers stood in rows, their faces lighting up as they saw their comrades return victorious. The sight was unlike anything Cathar had ever experienced. In the Dominion, victory was acknowledged with silent nods and formal reports. Here, it was celebrated with genuine joy. Cathar stepped out of the transport behind Jackson and Torres. The moment his towering figure appeared, the cheering grew louder. He wasn't sure how to react. Humans clapped him on the back, shouted their thanks, and grinned up at him with admiration. "Looks like you're a hero now," Jackson said, smirking. Cathar frowned slightly. "I did what was necessary. The victory is yours." Torres shook her head. "You fought beside us, Cathar. That makes it our victory." Colonel Taylor approached, his sharp eyes scanning Cathar. "Commander, you've earned your place here today. Humanity owes you a debt of gratitude." Cathar straightened, his imposing frame towering over the colonel. "You owe me nothing. I fought because I saw something worth protecting. Your people, your spirit. It's rare in the galaxy." Taylor nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Still, your actions saved countless lives. You could have stood aside, but you chose to fight with us. That means something." As the crowd dispersed, Cathar followed Taylor to the command center for the debriefing. Inside, the atmosphere was quieter, but no less intense. Officers reviewed reports, coordinated cleanup efforts, and discussed the aftermath of the battle. Taylor motioned for Cathar to sit. "We'll keep this brief. The Zarkiri fleet is retreating, but we need to prepare for potential retaliation. The Dominion will hear about this. What do you think their response will be?" Cathar considered the question. The Dominion values order and strength. They will not approve of this rogue faction's actions, but they will not ignore Earth's defiance either. You've shown you're more than a primitive species. That makes you a threat. Taylor leaned forward. "And you? Where do you stand?" Cathar met his gaze without hesitation. "With humanity. The Dominion's ways are flawed. They mistake fear for respect, power for strength. What I've seen here is true strength, born from unity, resilience, and creativity. It's something the galaxy could learn from." The room fell silent for a moment. Then Taylor extended his hand. "Then consider yourself an ally, Cathar. Welcome to the fight." Cathar clasped his hand firmly, a gesture that now felt natural to him. "I will stand with you." The debriefing ended, and Cathar found himself walking alone through the base. He observed the soldiers, some laughing, some mourning, but all standing together. This was a world he had once dismissed as weak. Now he saw it as something extraordinary. Jackson and Torres found him later, sitting outside beneath the evening sky. The stars were just beginning to appear, and the air was cool and still. "Deep in thought?" Jackson asked, sitting beside him. Cathar nodded. "This planet, your people, you are unlike anything I have known. I thought strength was about dominance. I see now it is about connection, about standing together even when the odds are against you." Torres smiled. "That's humanity for you. We don't always get it right, but we never stop trying. Cathar looked up at the stars, his expression softening. The Dominion will come. They will test your strength again. Jackson shrugged. Let them. We've got you now. Cathar chuckled, a deep and rumbling sound that surprised even him. Yes, you do. For the first time, Cathar felt at peace. He had come to Earth as a skeptic, expecting weakness and failure. Instead, he had found a strength that could rival even the Dominion's might, and he would ensure the galaxy knew it. As the stars shone brighter above, Cathar silently vowed to protect this world and its people, not out of duty, but out of respect and admiration for the humanity that had changed him forever.